There's a door in your mind that's been locked for years. Behind it sits everything you believe you know about women over 40. What's funny is, the key has been sitting in your pocket this entire time. You walk past that door every day, not realizing how much of what you've accepted as truth is actually just a story someone else wrote for you. A story about what happens when a woman steps into her 40s, as if there's some invisible line she crosses that changes everything. Today, that door is getting kicked open. What's waiting on the other side will either shake you or set you free, depending on how willing you are to face the reality of who women become after 40, what they secretly desire, what fuels them, and why most of what we've been told is a carefully packaged lie meant to keep everyone in neat little boxes. I stumbled on this truth completely by accident. I was 36, sitting in a coffee shop, pretending to work while actually eavesdropping on a group of women at the next table. They were in their 40s and 50s. What began as small talk quickly turned into something that made me quietly shut my laptop and just listen. They weren't talking about grandchildren or sharing recipes, which I ignorantly expected. Instead, they were talking about their bodies as if they'd just discovered them for the first time. They talked about desires that could make a 20-year-old blush, about personal dreams that had nothing to do with husbands, children, or anyone else. One woman, probably mid-40s, said something that burned itself into my memory. I spent 20 years being who everyone else needed me to be. Now I'm going to spend the next 20 being who I actually am. That is the real turning point that happens to women around 40. It's always not some sad decline like people make it sound. It's always the opposite. It's like watching someone wake up after years of sleep. Think of a snake that's been carrying the same skin for 2 decades. One day it starts to shed it, revealing something brighter, more alive, more dangerous underneath. That's what this transformation looks like. All the layers of expectation, duty, and performance start peeling away, and what emerges is a version of a woman that most men aren't prepared to meet. The first shift people notice, but almost always misunderstand, is the change in how they relate to their bodies and appearance. Society pushes this false idea that women over 40 become obsessed with how they look because they re-terrified of aging. That's not what's happening. For the first time, they stop caring about looking good for others, husbands, society, other women, and start doing it entirely for themselves. They rediscover the pleasure of feeling good in their own skin. I saw this with my ex-wife. At 38, she looked tired, worn out, like she'd given up on caring about herself. 4 years later, after our divorce, I ran into her at a party. I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she had cosmetic work done or dramatically lost weight, but because she moved like someone who finally belonged in her own skin. Her posture was different, her energy sharper, her style bold in a way I'd never seen. When I asked what had changed, she laughed and said, "I finally realized I wasn't dressing up for anyone else, I'm creating art for me." But the real shock comes when you understand what drives this change. It's not about attracting men or clinging to their youth. It's about power. Women over 40 often realize they've only been living at 30% of their sexual and personal capacity. For years, their lives revolved around raising kids, building careers, maintaining marriages. They put their own desires in a box and locked it away. Then one day the kids are grown, the career is stable or left behind. The marriage is either solid or finished, and suddenly they're standing face to face with themselves again. They're not done. They're still here. They can still feel, want, explore. And when that switch flips, it's not a delicate process. It's explosive. The sexual awakening of a 40-year-old woman isn't a gentle unfolding like a flower. It is a volcano that has been holding back for decades. Years of scheduling intimacy around kids' soccer games, making sure everyone else's needs came first, having sex for efficiency or baby-making rather than pleasure. All that suppression builds pressure. And eventually, that pressure erupts. When a woman in her 40s finally gives herself permission to feel what she wants to feel, to ask for what she needs, to explore what she's been curious about for years, it's like watching someone take full ownership of their body for the first time. I've experienced this shift personally, and nothing in my younger dating life prepared me for it. Dating women in their 20s or early 30s often felt like reading a book with half the pages missing. You understood the plot, but huge parts were vague. Dating women over 40 is like being handed the full director's cut, complete with all the scenes that were too intense for the original release. These women know their bodies inside and out. They know exactly where to go, what works, what doesn't. They're not hesitant or guessing, they're directing, and they expect their partners to keep up. But this transformation isn't just physical. Their entire checklist for relationships shifts. At 25, a woman choosing a partner might think about financial stability, family expectations, potential as a father. She's often filtering partners through other people's expectations. But at 45, the priorities change completely. Now, mental stimulation comes first. After decades of conversations about chores, schools, and routines, they're hungry for real intellectual connection. They want someone who can challenge their mind, make them question, keep them curious. Surface-level talk isn't going to cut it anymore. I learned this lesson fast with a 43-year-old professor I once dated. I figured I could coast on my looks and charm like I had with younger women. She ended that illusion quickly. One night, after what I thought was decent pillow talk, she turned to me and said, "If I wanted someone who can only talk about work and sports, I'd have stayed married. I can buy a toy that won't snore. What I want is someone who can discuss Sartre while making breakfast." That moment hit me hard. The second big thing they value is authenticity. Women over 40 develop an uncanny ability to spot insincerity. They've seen every line, every trick, every ego game. You can't fake it with them. They don't have time for performance or manipulation. They want real, even if real is messy, complicated, or unexpected. And this authenticity isn't just something they demand from others. They demand it from themselves, too. They stop living for other people as approval and start making choices that actually reflect who they are. I once saw this beautifully illustrated by a friend's wife. She was 44, had lived a perfect suburban life for 2 decades, and one day announced she was taking a 6-month solo trip through South America. No husband, no friends, just her. The family was stunned. "Why now?" they asked. Her answer was simple. "If not now, when?" She went. She came back transformed, not because of the trip itself, but because she finally gave herself permission to live for herself. Her marriage ended within a year, not due to infidelity, but because she simply couldn't shrink back into the box she'd outgrown. One of the biggest misunderstandings men have about women over 40 is thinking they're waiting to be saved. That fairy tale idea that they're looking for a prince to come in and rescue them, it doesn't apply anymore. By the time a woman reaches her 40s, she's already done the saving over and over. She's survived tough marriages, raised kids, buried parents, rebuilt careers, faced heartbreak, and stared her own mortality in the face. She doesn't need someone to complete her because she has already figured out how to be whole on her own. What she actually wants is someone who enhances her life, not defines it. She wants a partner, not a savior. This is also why so many men find women over 40 intimidating. These women aren't waiting around hoping someone chooses them. They're doing the choosing. And that difference changes everything. Being needed means a woman might tolerate things because she feels she has no choice. Being chosen means she has decided you bring something meaningful to her already full life. And if you don't, she'll walk away without a second thought. The dating world is where this shift shows itself most clearly. Yes, women over 40 are on the dating apps, but not for the reasons people assume. A 25-year-old might write, "looking for a serious relationship," and mean exactly that. She's imagining marriage, kids, a shared future. A 45-year-old might write the same thing, but there's usually a different subtext. She's not necessarily chasing a ring or moving in with anyone. What she actually wants is quality. A steady, mentally engaging partner who can also satisfy her physically and doesn't embarrass her in public. She wants good conversation, real chemistry, and consistency, not because she's desperate for commitment, but because finding someone who can truly match her is rare. She's learned that good sex gets better with a partner who takes the time to understand her, and that doesn't happen in one night. Casual flings might have their place, but what she values most is reliability and depth. When she writes serious, she often means someone who won't waste my time. She's done with performative dating and empty gestures. Another thing that surprises men is how sharp women over 40 become at reading people. It's almost unsettling. They can sense neediness, arrogance, manipulation, or insecurity long before you think you've revealed anything. And just as quickly, they can recognize genuine quality. Within a few minutes of meeting someone, they usually know whether this is going anywhere. If they sense you're pretending, still performing, or trying to use tricks that worked on younger women, they won't stick around. They won't try to fix you. They won't hope you'll change. They'll simply move on. I experienced this firsthand when I met a 47-year-old executive for coffee. We sat down, talked for maybe 15 minutes. She smiled politely and said, "You're attractive and charming, but you're not ready for someone like me. You're still performing." Then she paid for her coffee and walked out. I was stunned at first, but later I realized she wasn't being harsh. She was being clear. She didn't have the energy to train someone to meet her where she already was. What's fascinating is how their relationships with other women evolve too. When they're younger, women often compete with each other, especially for attention. In their 40s, that competition melts away and is replaced with collaboration and support that's both powerful and deeply loyal. There's this invisible network they build with each other, sharing everything. Which men are worth their time? Who's great in bed? Which dating apps are better? Who's emotionally unavailable? Which younger men are actually interested in older women? They exchange this information like intelligence agents, fast, efficient, and brutally honest. They also encourage each other in ways that would surprise most men. They cheer each other on for exploring new things, for embracing their desires without shame, for prioritizing themselves. I've sat at dinner tables with groups of women over 40 and watched them celebrate one friend's divorce like it was a graduation. Another talked openly about dating a man 15 years younger, and no one batted an eye. Another shared that she'd just had her first orgasm at 46 and the table erupted in cheers. No judgment, no awkwardness, just shared joy. Their friendships become less about appearances and more about building each other up. Younger women often fear judgment from their peers. Older women create spaces where they can be fully themselves. They share travel plans, book recommendations, investment tips, and sex toy reviews in the same breath. It is a level of honesty and support that's rare in any other stage of life. Another unexpected shift happens with younger men. Not all women over 40 date younger, but a lot do. And it's not for the reasons people think. It's not about vanity or proving they still have it. It's about energy compatibility. A woman in her mid-40s who is experiencing her full sexual and personal awakening often has more vitality than men her age who settled into routines. Younger men are often more open, eager, and adaptable. They don't feel threatened by a woman who knows what she wants. I remember talking to a woman who almost exclusively dated men 10 to 15 years younger. When I asked why, she said, "Men my age act like they're doing me a favor by being interested. Younger men are grateful. They're excited to be with someone who actually knows what she's doing." She laughed and added, "And honestly, they can keep up when I want sex twice a day without needing a prescription." But beyond sex and dating, women over 40 often dive headfirst into new interests and passions with a kind of intensity that surprises even them. The creative and personal energy that might have been poured into raising children or maintaining a household suddenly gets redirected inward. They don't just join a book club, they start writing novels. They don't just take a painting class, they're exhibiting their art. They don't dabble in yoga, they become instructors. It's like a dam has broken, and everything they suppressed for years flows out all at once. Financial independence is another game changer. Many women in their 40s have built careers or gone through divorces that left them in control of their own money. They have homes, savings, investments, and plans. They're not looking for someone to take care of them financially. They already do that. Which means when they choose someone, it's based purely on attraction, compatibility, and emotional connection. That terrifies men who've coasted through relationships relying on their wallet instead of their character or presence. When money is no longer the hook, You have to bring something real. This stage of life strips away illusions. It's not about pretending anymore. The competitiveness that once existed between women fades, replaced by a deep understanding that they're allies, not rivals. Their identities expand beyond being mothers, wives, or caretakers. Their relationships with their children change too. They stop living through their kids and start living alongside them. They become role models for what it looks like to prioritize personal happiness without guilt. This can be unsettling for children who grew up with mom as mom, not as a whole woman with desires and ambitions of her own, but it's also liberating. It teaches them that a parent's happiness matters too. And then there's their sexuality, which shifts in both quality and variety. It's not just about having more sex, it's about having better, more honest sex. They explore things they were too shy, scared, or busy to try before. They read, experiment, attend workshops, invest in their pleasure, and rewrite what intimacy means on their terms. They're not performing anymore. They're enjoying. One of the most powerful transformations that happens when women hit their 40s is how their relationship with solitude changes. Many men underestimate this part completely. These women are not terrified of being alone. In fact, a lot of them start to crave it. They discover that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. For the first time in decades, they have space to breathe, to think, to hear their own voice without the constant noise of family, partners, or society telling them who to be. They've spent years putting everyone else first: kids, partners, parents, jobs, often to the point where their own identity got buried under layers of responsibility. Then one day, the house is quiet, the kids are grown, or they finally leave a relationship that's been draining them. And in that silence, something magical happens. They realize they actually like their own company. They start waking up on their own schedule, eating what they want, decorating their space however they like, traveling alone, or just sitting with a book in total peace. This is where desperation falls away. When a woman no longer fears being alone, her standards shift overnight. She doesn't need a relationship to fill a void anymore because the void doesn't exist. She's filled it with herself. She's found contentment in her own rhythm. So when someone comes into her life, she's not looking for someone to rescue her from solitude. She's looking for someone whose presence makes that solitude even richer. This completely changes the dynamic of dating and relationships. You can't manipulate someone who isn't afraid of being alone. You can't control her with threats of leaving because she knows she'll be fine without you. She won't tolerate disrespect, half-effort, or emotional games. She's no longer driven by the fear of running out of time or being left behind. She's driven by the desire for something real, or nothing at all. This scares a lot of men, especially those who are used to relationships built on dependency. A woman who enjoys her own company can be won over with surface-level charm or material things. She's not impressed by what used to impress. She's looking for emotional intelligence, consistency, and a sense of self in a partner that matches her own. If you can't bring that, she'll gladly keep her peace instead. And here's something that often catches men off guard. Women over 40 have already faced some of life's hardest moments. They've buried loved ones, been through heartbreak, endured illnesses, raised children, navigated careers, and experienced loss in different forms. They've had to be their own anchor more times than they can count. This makes them emotionally resilient in a way that younger women often aren't yet. They know how to stand on their own 2 feet. They're not fragile. They don't need constant validation. And because of that, they're less willing to tolerate immaturity. The dating mistakes men make with women over 40 usually come from treating them like younger women who are still figuring themselves out. Men assume they can impress them with money, status, or sweet talk. They assume these women are grateful for any attention because society keeps telling them they past their prime. They assume they'll be easy to please or eager to settle down. They assume they'll have simpler desires. All of those assumptions are wrong. What women over 40 actually want is far more layered. They want adventure and safety, passion and stability, freedom and connection. They want to be desired but not objectified, respected for who they've become rather than compared to who they once were. They want conversations that challenge their mind, intimacy that awakens their body, and companionship that respects their independence. They're not looking for perfection, they're looking for real. And if they don't find that, they're completely fine choosing themselves. That's the part that flips the power dynamic entirely. They're not waiting around. They're living their lives, they're traveling, starting businesses, exploring new passions, meeting friends, and yes, enjoying romance, but only on their terms. Society, meanwhile, hasn't quite caught up to this reality. The cultural story is still that women over 40 are supposed to settle down, fade quietly, or be grateful for scraps of attention. Meanwhile, these same women are having the best sex of their lives, diving into new careers, building communities, and celebrating their independence. The old narrative says they're fading. The truth is they're catching fire. I've seen this firsthand. At a dinner with a group of women all in their 40s and 50s, not one conversation revolved around getting a man. Instead, they were sharing travel plans, new business ideas, adventures they'd taken alone, dating experiences that were on their terms. One woman had just returned from hiking across Europe by herself. Another had ended a long marriage and was glowing, not broken. Another was pursuing a degree she'd always dreamed of. There wasn't an ounce of desperation in that room, just a quiet, powerful certainty. And this is where men either rise to meet them or quietly fall away. Because at this stage, women aren't willing to shrink themselves anymore. They've spent decades playing roles for other people. The perfect wife, the good mother, the agreeable girlfriend. But now, they're done performing. They've stepped into their own skin fully. The women who thrive after 40 are not the ones desperately trying to relive their 20s. They're the ones who have embraced exactly where they are. They've stopped apologizing for wanting pleasure, for prioritizing themselves, for taking up space. They're not competing with younger women. They're not even playing the same game. They've rewritten the rules entirely. Men who understand this don't try to control it. They don't come in thinking they're saving her. They show up as equals. They bring depth, respect, and stability to the table. They don't get intimidated by her independence because they've cultivated their own. They don't see her confidence as a threat, but as an invitation to meet her at her level. This is why the question for men isn't how do I impress a woman over 40? It's, am I secure and evolved enough to walk beside her? Because she doesn't need you to lead her. She's been leading herself for decades. She doesn't need you to carry her. She's been carrying everyone else. She doesn't need to be completed. She's already whole. And here's the truth that most people miss. Women over 40 aren't disappearing into the background. They're stepping into the spotlight of their own lives. They're not slowing down. They're just starting to live fully, on their own terms. Remember that locked door I mentioned at the beginning? The one hiding all your assumptions about women over 40? By now, that door isn't just open. It's gone. You've seen what's on the other side. These women are not fading away. They're glowing brighter than ever. They're not quietly accepting their fate. They're rewriting it. They've stopped asking for permission to exist in their full power. They don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. They've chosen themselves. And if you're lucky enough to be invited into that world, you'd better bring something real. Not because they demand perfection, but because they've earned the right to be selective. The question isn't whether they're ready for love, it's whether you're ready for them.